He thought she was just another defendant, another face in a sea of courtroom regulars, someone to bark orders at, push around, remind of the hierarchy. But what he didn't know was that the woman standing silently in front of him, calm despite his rage, wasn't just anyone. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't even a witness. No, the woman he was manhandling in front of the entire court held a badge that carried more authority than his own, a badge that had been earned through sacrifice, service, and strength. And in a few seconds, she was going to show it to him and turn his entire world upside down. This wasn't just a confrontation. This was a reckoning, a moment where history, race, power, and prejudice collided in front of a judge, a jury, and God himself. And the man who thought he was in charge, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. It was a regular Monday morning in a county courtroom, known more for tradition than progress. The kind of place where names hang in gold frames and old habits die hard. The kind of place where you can still feel the weight of history in the oak-paneled walls. Some of it honorable, some of it not. That morning the room was buzzing with the usual chatter. Attorneys reviewing notes, clerks organizing files, deputies positioned near exits. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until she walked in. She wasn't in uniform, no badge on display, just a black woman in plain clothes walking with quiet confidence. But confidence in a place like this was read differently when it came from someone like her. Heads turned, some narrowed their eyes, others whispered. No one asked who she was, they simply assumed. And one of those assumptions came from Officer Bradley, white, early 40s, proud of his rank and sure of his judgment. He spotted her across the room and didn't see a colleague. He saw a problem. And when you're used to power going unchallenged, sometimes all it takes is a presence you don't understand to make you feel threatened. He moved toward her, jaw tight, hand already half raised like he owned the place. There were no questions, no pause for clarification, just action born from bias. And as he approached, the courtroom itself seemed to brace for impact. "What are you doing here?" His voice cut through the courtroom like a rusted blade, loud, impatient, unmistakably hostile. She opened her mouth to speak, but he didn't let her. "This area is restricted," he barked, stepping in close. "Defendants wait outside." He was already making assumptions, each one stacking on the next like firewood before a spark. She didn't flinch, didn't argue. She simply said, "I believe you're mistaken." That should have been his cue to stop, but pride, when mixed with prejudice, has a way of blinding a man. "Don't tell me what I'm mistaken about," he snapped. "You people think you can do whatever you want." And there it was, the moment when his bias became blatant. Before anyone could react, he grabbed her arm, not hard enough to injure, but firm enough to humiliate. The room went silent. The clerks looked down. A few attorneys shifted in their chairs. No one intervened. No one asked him to stop. In that moment, it wasn't just about her. It was about the culture that allowed him to believe he could get away with it. The kind of culture where silence is safer than solidarity. And yet, through it all, she remained composed. Not angry, not afraid, just steady, like someone who knew exactly who she was and exactly what kind of storm was about to hit. He had no idea that the woman he was trying to throw out was the one person in the building with more power than him, the sheriff, his sheriff, and she was about to introduce herself. She turned to him slowly, deliberately, no panic, no raised voice, just a calm, almost haunting stillness. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a leather badge case, held it up, not like a weapon, but like a mirror. "Sheriff Denise Walker," she said, her voice strong and even. "I'm the new chief law enforcement officer of this county." The badge gleamed in the courtroom light, and for a split second, you could have heard a gavel drop. The room froze. Even the judge paused mid-sentence. Officer Bradley's hand, still on her arm, recoiled like he'd touched fire. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He stepped back, eyes wide. His posture crumbled. The swagger evaporated, because everything he thought he knew about her, about this courtroom, about who holds power, was shattered in that moment. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand anything. She just stood there letting the truth speak louder than any accusation could. The deputies who had stood by silently were now scrambling, unsure whether to apologize or disappear. The court clerks, suddenly interested in the floor tiles, dared not make eye contact. Sheriff Walker didn't move. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply let the weight of the moment do the work. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens. Sometimes it walks in quietly, stands tall, and says, "I belong here." And when she said those words, it wasn't just Officer Bradley who heard them. It was everyone who had ever doubted her, disrespected her, or dismissed her. That courtroom would never see her the same again. The shift in the room was almost physical, like someone had opened a window and let in a gust of truth. You could feel the shame ripple through the space. Officer Bradley backed away, face flushed, mumbling something about protocol. But it was too late for excuses. The damage was done, and it was public. The judge cleared his throat, unsure how to proceed. Clerks suddenly found urgent paperwork to shuffle. Even the bailiff looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. The balance of power had flipped in an instant. Not with rage, not with force, but with authority earned and injustice revealed. Bradley didn't speak again. His authority drained from him like blood from a wound. What moments ago had seemed like confidence was now clearly arrogance. What had looked like law enforcement now resembled misconduct. The truth didn't just embarrass him, it exposed him. And in that exposure, the entire system he represented was put on trial, even if the docket didn't say so. Sheriff Walker didn't rub it in. She didn't need to. Her presence said everything. In a world that expects black women to shrink, she expanded. And in doing so, she cracked something open, something far bigger than one man's ego. Because what happened in that courtroom wasn't just about disrespect, it was about recognition. And once the truth showed its face, there was no turning away from it. This wasn't a rare event. This wasn't a one-time misunderstanding. It was a reflection, a clear, damning reflection of how power and prejudice still operate in places that claim to serve justice. Sheriff Walker's experience wasn't just hers. It belonged to every black woman who's ever been talked over, looked past, underestimated, or outright ignored while wearing a badge, holding a degree, or simply standing their ground. What made this moment powerful wasn't just the twist, it was the restraint. She could have erupted. She could have demanded apologies, filed charges, made a scene, but she didn't. She stood there with the kind of dignity that exposes ignorance without lifting a finger. And that's what made it undeniable. She didn't just earn that badge, she embodied it. Not just the symbol of law enforcement, but the moral weight of it. The badge didn't just prove her rank, it reflected her restraint. This story became more than an incident. It became an indictment, a conversation starter, a mirror held up to the faces of those who still can't see past skin color before making a judgment. People like Officer Bradley weren't just exposed, they were educated. And for the silent ones watching, those who saw but said nothing, it was a wake-up call. In that moment, the sheriff didn't just protect justice, she redefined it. And everyone in that courtroom walked away knowing they'd witnessed something that wouldn't stay within those walls. News spread fast. The confrontation was caught on courthouse cameras, and by the next morning, clips had flooded social media. Headlines followed. New sheriff harassed in her own courtroom. Bias on full display. Power misjudged. Public outrage ignited. Protests formed outside the courthouse within 48 hours. Community leaders called for accountability, not just for Officer Bradley, but for every silent witness in that room. Internal Affairs launched an immediate investigation. Bradley was placed on administrative leave. Meanwhile, Sheriff Walker stepped forward, not as a victim, but as a leader. She held a press conference, not to shame, but to educate. She called for bias training, transparency in misconduct cases, and a full review of courtroom security protocols. And she didn't stop there. She met with lawmakers, clergy, activists. She used her platform not for retaliation, but for reform. Departments across the region took note. Other sheriffs reached out. Policies began to shift. And just like that, one moment of injustice became a movement toward integrity. Sheriff Walker made it clear. This wasn't about one man. It was about many. And if the system was going to change, it had to start with stories like hers being told. Not just whispered behind closed doors, but shouted in town halls and etched into policy. Because silence, she said, is where injustice hides. And she was done being silent. This story isn't just about a cop who got it wrong. It's about a country that still does. A system that too often confuses color for character and silence for safety. Sheriff Walker didn't just reclaim her power. She showed what true leadership looks like. Not with fury, but with focus. Not with vengeance, but with vision. Her badge wasn't just a shield, it was a statement. That justice doesn't wear one face. That dignity doesn't have one voice. That real authority doesn't need to shout to be heard. And in that courtroom, a woman once underestimated became a symbol of everything right about law and everything broken in it. The lesson? Never mistake silence for weakness, and never ever assume you know who someone is until you've asked. If this story moved you, share it, speak on it, talk about it with your friends, your family, your community. Let Sheriff Walker's stand be a spark, not a footnote. And if you believe in stories that expose truth and demand better, subscribe, because the fight for justice needs all of us.